Little tradition last year at Infileon, which is to really acknowledge what is going on in our industry around inclusion, and we called it the Inclusion Cafe. And we had an amazing response to this, not only the content, but also the idea that we could intersectionally have a conversation and really solve problems together. So I'm proud to say this is year 2. This is a very special panel to me. I want to really give a big thank you to Sheila Marmon from Mirror Digital, who and her team for sponsoring this day, and we get to acknowledge Juneteenth. I know it's been a long day, so finally, I don't know how many times you've acknowledged it, but for me, this is a very special moment. So thank you. I'm going to have the panelists introduce themselves, but let me give you a brief overview about what we're going to talk about today. And so, you know, since 2020, I know you've heard that a million times, we have all talked about diversity and really acknowledging diversity media, multicultural advertising, et cetera, in our industry. And today we're going to talk about the amount of progress we've made. So we'll be a little bit of the scorecard for everybody, and I am expecting a super honest conversation up here because when I looked at the SMI guideline data, you know, we started out about 1%. We're at like 1.16% of all media placement is minority placement. And so with that daunting information, I'll let the group really talk about, you know, how they feel about that. But let's do intros first. Sheila.
Good afternoon, everyone. Laurel, thank you so much for having us for this important conversation. Appreciate you, appreciate this important effort that Infileon has been behind, and Mirror Digital is really proud to be a partner today on Juneteenth. My name is Sheila Marmon. I'm the founder and CEO of Mirror Digital. We are a digital media company focused on helping brands connect with diverse audiences, really from a publishing lens. So we have a network of websites, we have a network of creators on social media platforms, and we have a network of podcasters that are really focused on super serving Black, Brown, Asian, Latin, LGBTQ audiences. And we've really been a pioneer in this space, doing this work for over 12 years. So I'm excited to be here and be part of this conversation.
Thank you for having us. Mark Walker, Chairman and CEO of Direct Digital Holdings. What we do is we have a buy-side and a sell-side platform, and we help small to mid-sized businesses connect to the ecosystem, the programmatic ecosystem, with a hard focus on multicultural audiences and publishers.
My name is Lori Good. I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Index Exchange. In addition to marketing responsibilities, I also lead learning and development, and am in the sustainability and DE&I lead for the company. I'm very excited to be here, and just under excited to be here. I'm excited that we're under this shade as it rains really hard. So thanks for having us. I really appreciate this. In addition to Index, though, I want to mention that I'm also on the board of an organization called Bridge. Mark is also on the board with us, and Bridge is a trade organization designed for advancing DE&I and incorporating inclusion into corporations, both from a marketplace perspective and a workplace perspective.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having us here. We really appreciate it. Cavell Khan, I'm the Chief Growth Officer of Group Black. Group Black is a media company that works with a collective of smaller, mid-sized, diverse-owned, and primarily Black-owned media companies to help ensure that the investments that are being spent to reach diverse audiences is being invested through diverse-owned media companies, and we've built a collective around that. We're basically, you know, infrastructure as a service, sales as a service, brand strategy, bringing all those together for smaller media companies who don't quite have the resources to build that, and putting that together to bring it to marketplace to help them sort of drive more revenue to them from the media ecosystem.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kimberly Jones, and I'm the president and CEO of Butler Till. We are a media and communications agency. Well, I guess that's what we do. I'm not sure that's what we are. Actually, I'm more proud to say that we are a woman-owned and WBE certified, thank you, 100% employee-owned, and a certified B Corporation. So this idea of purpose-driven advertising and branding and programmatic inventory is particularly important to us and the values that we have and share with our clients.
Thank you so much. Thank you. What an esteemed group. I really appreciate it. And your being here. And I feel like I want to kick it off and really maybe take a positive slant at first. Open to all of you. Which brands and agencies are doing it well? Who's really stepping up, and what's happened over the past couple of years that we can be super proud of?
I can start with that. One partnership that I've been really excited about is with General Motors, to name names. They have been a partner. They have been willing to listen and learn and really understand our challenges and respond not only with direct investment in terms of our products and services, but also really supporting the ecosystem with their investment fund. So they have an investment fund that's supporting programming, that's supporting infrastructure development. So solving some of the larger ecosystem issues that are more difficult for one publisher or one smaller scale publisher to solve alone. So I would say that they've done a good job with their agency. Kara is their media AOR, who we work with very closely. So, hats off to them and their team.
I know you guys are going to jump in. I want to come back to one thing in a minute, and that is I want to ask how they got started, but please go.
Yeah, I would say, with our platform, we deal with about 100,000 buyers of media on a monthly basis. AT&T, Lowe's, Home Depot, the interesting thing, all of those have been great partners, and some of the agencies that they work with have also been outstanding partners. Omnicom, Publicis, Dentsu, they've all been great partners of ours. The one thing that I will say that we have observed are the people who believe, they continually do. And they do in some capacity. And so since we've been around for 5 years, I will say that our top clients have almost been all the same over the last 5 years, and they've increased their investments. So it's partners like that that we actually appreciate, and it's partners like that that actually show with their dollars where their hearts are and also where they're deriving value. And we think that's what's important for us.
I'm happy to share one. Lilly is a partner of ours, but just in general, a brand that I think is doing this really well in a couple of areas. So first and foremost, if you talk to the Lilly team, they will tell you our mission is to reach more patients and reach more providers with our medicine. And so from that understanding, of course, patients and providers aren't general market, they're everyone. And so you see Lilly as a brand, even in a rebranding to Lilly from Eli Lilly and the campaign that they're running now broadly, they are making sure that they are showing and representing the wide spectrum of who their patients are in their advertising. So that's one aspect, right? Like really truly walking the walk and talking the talk. And that, we didn't do that with them. They did that on their own. They partnered with their agency, but you could see it reflected in like even the directors who they use, because I talked to them about it. They were intentional about making sure they're using people from the community. They went to South Africa and shot some things and used a director from South Africa to create that campaign. The second piece is they understand where the challenges are and they do something about it. So what do I mean by that? When we started working with Lilly, there was no way we could hit the efficiency goals that they had set for their agency based on what, and I come from big media, I worked at Microsoft and Twitter and a lot of big companies. So when you have scale, you have economies of scale, and you can have your CPM go down for $10 billion more, right? So that makes it easy. When the companies that we represent, they can't do that. That's their margin. You go down too low and like you're out of business. And so Lilly said, okay, if that's the blocker, they specifically gave a separate goal to their agency to say, we are not holding these companies to that efficiency goal, right? So they put their money where their mouth is in terms of understanding the landscape and that there's been a lack of investment there and then driving into it. The third piece I'd mention is how they're approaching the community. So again, coming back to this concept of we want to reach providers and patients, they asked us and said, okay, if we're doing that, how do we do that? How do we reach African-American patients? I said, well, did you know that a vast majority of black doctors actually graduate from HBCUs? They did not know that. Show them the numbers. My wife is a doctor. She graduated from an HBCU, so I personally knew that stat. She tells me all the time. So, I brought that information to them, and then we created a program. We're in the middle of it right now, where the number one problems that these doctors have is when they're in medical school, they don't have mentors, right? The professors can't mentor every single student, and there's not enough. They haven't hit that point where like there's enough other doctors or doctors of color that understand their unique experience. However, inside of Lilly, there are plenty of PhDs, there are plenty of doctors, there are plenty of scientists who understand that journey that they're going through. And so we did a partnership with them, and we said to them, you can't do this one time. If you're not going to commit to a multi-year program, we're not doing this. We're not going to sign up for it. And they committed to a multi-year program where they're going to be providing mentorship for doctors in certain medical schools, the one that have the top graduates, as well as they're showing up in the schools, providing resources. This is not a media campaign. It's not a marketing. It is an initiative to achieve their goal that we're partnering with. And that, to me, is like a great example of how brands need to move to show up and put the dollars where they are to drive against their long-term business goal, not just hit a short-term campaign.
It's amazing. I'm familiar with that team, and I think the level of commitment is just so deep. Just real quick follow-up for you guys. Just everybody asks the same question: how do I get started? For those that aren't this deep, Cavell, what's the secret formula? I'd like to hear.
That's the problem. There isn't one, right? Everyone is in a different space. Everyone has a different CFO that's holding them to a different standard. And so you really need to understand what are the dynamics of, the question I always ask is like, what is the metric that if we deliver or a partner delivers is going to make you or your CFO say that was a success? Then I ask, okay, so what's the investment to hit that metric? And so that's where I try to push them a little bit and saying, okay, if you understand and you have the data on this is what I'm trying to achieve, and you're spending half hour, an hour in a meeting with me, let's make sure that it has some purpose. And let's make sure that you're walking away with something that is tangible that you can work on. And so that's typically how we try to get at where does the starting point need to be? And based on what they say, that starting point could look different. For some brands, it's like, okay, well, I need to show lift. I'm like, great, well, do the math. You know this better than me. You have data scientists. How much would you need to spend on a campaign to actually have enough sufficiency and reach and scale that it would show up in your measurement to show lift? And that could be a large number for some. That could be a small number for some. For others, it's, well, if we could do a brand study against it, and I see, okay, a lift in consideration, or I see a lift in intent, that's good enough. So there you could do maybe a smaller test, right, where you can demonstrate that a lot easier. So it really, there is no, I haven't found one, maybe someone else has, there really isn't, from what I've seen, a one-size-fits-all, where do you start? It starts with time, it starts with understanding what your goal is that you want to achieve, and what's the level of investment you need to make to achieve that goal.
Yes, I can give you at least an agency perspective, because as a women-owned agency and a purpose-led agency, we talked about what that metric should be and what that goal should be. And we said 10%. So it's just, to your point, starting somewhere. We said 10% of our inventory should be diverse media, and we should be working towards that. And we're not there, but guess what? We're at 5%, which is a heck of a lot higher than the 1% that you quoted earlier, Laurel. And we'll continue to work on that and curate digitally owned media to be able to reach audiences and ultimately increase the effectiveness of our campaigns. Because I do think at the end of the day, you have to be able to demonstrate ROAS. You can't have different metrics, I believe, for purpose-led or diverse media than you would have for mass market. Otherwise, it's not sustainable. And so we've been actually able to test our curated marketplaces and demonstrate that in many cases, they actually have higher ROAS than those that aren't curated.
Yeah, we've seen the same stats as well. So when typically with our clients, they do compare our SSP in comparison to others' SSPs, and what they have found is our metrics are either comparable or better. And so that continues the investment and continues the growth. Now, we work diligently on the back end to try to curate and manage our inventory to make it as effective as possible. But we do believe the same thing, that at some point, usually during a recession, tough decisions start being made, and the ones that usually get cut are the multicultural or the diverse-owned media. And so we are working diligently to try to manage the same level of metrics in order for when that time comes, we're not the one that's on the chopping block.
So you would probably suggest starting with a test, because you know that you're going to be able to prove out success and then garner more and more of the media investment over time.
That's exactly what we do.
I think one thing that I noticed, though, in our conversation last week, and then you just said it again, so it reinforces or validates that the point is real, is you talked about the metric or the KPI being lift. If you're testing diverse-owned media and the metric is lift to start with, that seems like a disadvantage to any other kind of media that you would run a test against, because it seems like incremental lift over existing programs is a higher expectation for success than just, is it going to perform as well as, and is this audience inventory and purpose important enough to say, I can switch from one to the next, and I don't need it to be better than what I'm already doing. And what gets better is optimization of that media over time. And so when you mentioned that last week, I was like, they're thinking about it in the wrong way. Stop talking about lift. You'll get the lift once you start to invest and optimize and make that media channel better. But if the expectation right now is you have to be better than the media that you're already buying or we're not going to buy it, that already puts it at a complete inequity against the rest of your media plan.
I agree with you, but the secret is they're so underinvested in the space that it's actually not that. Am I right, Sheila? It's not that hard to prove the lift because they're so underinvested and they're not talking to these audiences. So again,
so you're like, I can get the lift immediately?
As long as they give the investment to achieve that lift.
You have to have the scale of investment to achieve the lift. So sometimes people want to split the baby and they're like, we want the lift, but we're not going to really put the investment there. So I think it's important to say, even if you want to start small, even if you want to start with that test budget, let's invest and then learn. And know that we may not get to incremental lift. We may not even get to the same KPIs as the rest of the campaign, but this is a moment to learn. This is a moment to experiment. And if it doesn't work, you can't pull the plug. You have to know that this is the first step in a longer-term journey where we're looking at the specific ways that we're going to invest in diverse consumers to be able to future-proof your business and drive growth in these audiences that are dominating growth.
Yeah, to the point about let's get real with the conversation, one of the things that happens, to your point about can't pull the campaign, right, is what you see happening a lot is if something is under the, call it multicultural, which it really shouldn't be, it should be growth, because this is your growth path. Oh, if the multicultural campaign didn't work, then multicultural doesn't work. But if it's general market, no one says general market doesn't work. They say, well, this campaign didn't work. Why didn't it work?
Or
and
this
let's do
tactic
something
didn't
different.
work.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so that's the bias that you see in sort of this space relative to general market. And that's part of the problem, right?
I think it points to, and specifically being digital, there's not an opportunity for optimization. In like every campaign, it starts off at one hypothesis, but it optimizes over time till you get to the performance that you're actually looking for. And I will say that I do believe that there is not that allowance for optimization seen when multicultural marketing or diverse audiences are trying to run campaigns.
I think this is like the self-serve panel, by the way. Not managed service. This is self-serve right here.
Just saying the mic over.
I love it. I actually, this may sound a little negative, but I'm going to ask Lori a question. Programmatic's overpromise, underdeliver in some ways. I mean, we just bought Media Math. We're excited. We're headlong. Diversity's our thing, and we want to get it 100% right. What are we all doing right or wrong? Sorry.
What are we all doing right or wrong? What needs to happen, what needs to be right, and what I strongly believe Index Exchange does is we need to get transparency right. We need to get clear expectations, and we need to make programmatic well-lit and efficient. If you are not transparent about your practices and where the media is going and the value exchange that's happening across the board, programmatic becomes very scary, and you're actually not sure what you're getting at the end of the day. And so there has to be clear expectations. You have to have strong exchange quality teams. And I'll give you a recent example. So, and it's been in the media lately, so I hope that many of you will have heard of it. MFA, made for advertising sites. It is a problem in the industry, and one of the things that Index did over a year ago, before it was called MFA, we started to notice this activity in our exchange, and we started to, in phases, cut that exchange off and cut that supply out of our exchange. And it took us until February of this past year to get all of the MFA out of our exchange. Now, MFA can come back at any time, and it's easy. A publisher can make a change. When we find it, we terminate it. What that did, though, to some diverse-owned media in a broad spectrum is that MFA is not singularly defined. There isn't a standard definition for that. And where that impacted diverse-owned media is that diverse-owned media often does not necessarily have the traffic scale to make their publishing work. And so they buy traffic from from other publishers like Facebook in order to get more traffic to their sites. This is legitimate traffic to legitimate publishers who are developing amazing content for a real audience. And MFA put them at a disadvantage. And so that's the conversation I'm talking about. And so Index, even early on, created an exception process. So you could actually go back and apply for it and say, hey, you're trying to cut my supply. This is my, there's a term for it, I always forget it. Oh, anyway, you rebut it, basically, and you submit an application, you say, okay, this is actually why it's legitimate traffic, and we have brought back on supply that we thought could be MFA at first because you're not sure, and when there's justification behind it, it's not MFA. These publishers need to be supported. They need to take alternative tactics in order to get more traffic to their sites, and that's one way that I think programmatic has a very important role to play in support of diverse-owned media, is to not make those judgments, understand your supply, dig deep, and be transparent about your practices.
I appreciate that. Under promise, over. Oh, go
Can
ahead.
I add? I want to just add one more point on programmatic that I think is really important. When you are buying targeted publishers programmatically, that's your targeting, period. I think too often people have hands on keys. They want to add another layer. They want to do some of this. They want to zhuzh it up. And the thing, once you add on these other data layers, you get to a point where you have no scale. So if you're buying Mirror Digital programmatically, we already targeted it for you, so buy it. And so I think that's something that we've got to educate buyers on if you're buying diverse partners programmatically.
And I think that goes back to the scale. When I was CEO of Ebony, we had 3 to 5 million unique visitors. So if you add 10 to 15, some campaigns will add 25 layers. I mean, you just whittled that group down to 2. So then the scale becomes a real issue. So there needs, in the programmatic space, there definitely needs to be a better understanding of how filtering works and what filtering actually does to the numbers when you're trying to run a diverse campaign.
But at the same time, I love the targetability of it because the work that we do a lot of work in the pharma space, and so you are looking for particular patient populations, and so you need that extra data layer. But you can create scale and you can create efficiencies if you're able to curate marketplaces that are both diverse as well as meet certain patient population needs.
I feel like the over-promise, under-deliver comment is probably somewhat founded. I think that the scale topic is really the topic, and I think you've all addressed it in some way. I feel like, Cavell, you're focused on some big advertisers, et cetera. What about the mid-sized advertisers?
To be honest, we work mostly with the larger advertisers. We have started to have conversation with the mid-sized advertisers. Again, the things we're talking about here tends to sometimes be blockers. By the way, not everyone in our collective wants to participate in programmatic, right? So when you're talking to a mid-sized advertiser who 99% of what they're doing is programmatic, then they're leaving out partners who, and they don't do it because the other piece of to tie the two together is it's this sense that it's a race to the bottom, that it's a commoditization of the value that they spend a lot of time to create for their audience, that when you plug it into a programmatic ecosystem, suddenly it just comes about a CPM, and the systems are optimizing for scale and price, and when you don't have that, you're literally at the bottom of the waterfall, right? So, and this is the concept that we try to educate on with programmatic also is, hey, if you're going to say, I need to reach African American, or I need to reach Hispanic, or I need to reach women, I think you should go to a publisher that is their focus, who understands that deeply first, before you say, well, let me see if I find them in general market. Because the way that most sort of DSPs are tuned today is it's going to do a formula against your size and scale, and then your CPM, and typically the biggest volume players are going to win every time, even if that person is more resonant in another place, right? So it doesn't optimize for attentive reach. It just optimizes for reach, and that takes away from your effectiveness. And so,
don't you think that programmatic? I mean, I think of programmatic more as a way of buying, not a channel. So you can reach particular publishers with direct buys, but yet buy it programmatically.
but what we're seeing is that there's so much emphasis moving to programmatic that it takes away from the value of direct, and it takes away from the pricing difference, is where 99% of the conversations I have come down to just like pricing. And so that's where we're seeing a
you
challenge.
have a point
So
of view
funny.
on that because we've had a huge
Yeah.
shift of trying to move more and more of our buying to programmatic, but that doesn't mean that we don't want endemic inventory. In fact, we want to make deals either direct with publishers or direct with SSPs, but buy that inventory programmatically so that we have all of the advantages of data and targeting and measurability.
That's where I'm looking at you because we work together.
Is that
and
correct?
then
Did I say that
We
right?
now have, we can say that, and yeah, and Group Black, yeah, just
You
came
have
on as
programmatic,
a
by the way.
marketplace partner. And so I think about programmatic in the same way. There is the open web of programmatic, which means that you have maybe a harder time in finding those specific publishers. But in the case of curation and marketplaces, you are enabled then to curate the right kinds of inventory, and that is a direct relationship. And so I'm excited about some of these partnerships because it sits on top of the programmatic ecosystem and just makes it so efficient and so frictionless for buyers to come in. It's a huge leapfrog in diverse-owned media because now you have access to the right level of curation with the right level of visibility in a way that's programmatically transacted, and you don't have to sign paper every single time. And I think that's actually going to drive even more value and scale to diverse-owned media.
Fully agree. I think of programmatic as it's just the transaction and the mechanism for transaction, not the purpose, which inside of it, you can do PMP deals, you can do direct deals, programmatic guarantees, and all of those usually come with some variance on CPMs. Going back to your question, Laurel, specifically about the mid-market businesses, or middle market businesses, one half of our business, Orange 142, we actually work with about 250 small to mid-sized businesses. What we have found when we run campaigns with them is that most of them are performance marketing, and so they are truly trying to just acquire customers, and they don't care if they're Black, brown, Asian, or what have you. As long as you can acquire that customer at a certain price, then they're happy and they see that as performance success. So I do think that there's a real opportunity, specifically in diverse-owned media, to start looking at how to attract that specific customer set as a new growth opportunity for diverse-owned media.
We primarily focus on Fortune 100 brands, and we are a bootstrap company. So as we have scaled, we think about where we can get the biggest return on our time. And so really leaning into, it's a strategic customer investment model. 20% of your customers drive 80% of your revenue. So we really have to focus on those to make our model work. Not that we don't love all the rest of the brands out there. It's just where we focus to make our economics, make the math, as they say.
As in the work that I've done in the disability space, same thing. You focus on the large corporations because that's where the training is, those are where the dollars are, et cetera, and it usually does have a waterfall effect. But the middle market's having a moment. Let's change the conversation to agencies. I mean, look,
Thank you, Laurel.
We'll start with you, but I think so many of the dollars flow through the agencies. So let's talk a little bit about their part in it and how much progress they've made.
So I think it's an interesting perspective because we've all been sitting here talking about brands and their commitment to diverse-owned media. I mean, we made that determination as an agency. Yes, we have clients that have the same values, so I think inherently they're aligned to that mission. But as an agency, we said 10% of the media that we're running is going to go to diverse-owned partners, and that's a commitment we made to both our clients but also to our employees because it's a mission that's particularly important to them. And so, I mean, as long as we're holding that media to the same standard that our clients expect and to the same measurement tools, as we talked about earlier, they're happy that their money is going to diverse-owned companies,
And how does
publishers,
that
and media.
conversation start? I mean, you're passionate. You sort of
I am passionate. We use it as a differentiator. It's not a situation, in most cases, where clients are coming to us. In some cases, they are, especially if they're trying to reach a particular population. But really, they're trying to reach a mass audience. And part of the mass audience is, of course, the Black audience and the Asian audience. Everybody's the mass audience. And so we just said, this is the way that we should be buying media, period. And so that's how we talk about it when we're seeking new client relationships, and that's what we reinforce with the clients that we have. And because, again, we attract clients that share those same values, there's alignment inherently.
agencies.
You know, I want to believe that everybody is thinking about diverse audiences and understanding the growth opportunity and wanting to be inclusive and looking at a new general market like you are. But the reality is there are real headwinds that are presenting that we're presented with as diverse media partners. There has been a reduction in investment in a lot of instances. Leaders in DEI across the industry and a number of industries have been fired or their departments have been gutted. And so we have to really look at the fact that there is backlash against a lot of the progress and a lot of the open conversation that we were having about making our industry more inclusive, about being more thoughtful and inclusive, about investing in media and making sure audiences are broadly and widely represented. And so I think we have to have a real conversation about that, because I don't know what channel y'all are watching, but you know, I'm seeing a lot of my friends lose jobs. I'm seeing a lot of our partners facing really, really tough first halves of the year. You know, people struggling economically. It's not a walk in the park from where I'm sitting, and I would love to hear what other people are hearing and seeing.
Yeah, I think I plus one to everything that you just said. I think it is more challenging now than it was 2 years ago, and it's sort of, you kicked off with the stat, right? It moved from, 1.1 to 1.16, I think you said? Not much progress being made there. And even that number I kind of question, because 1% would, I think I did the math, and 1% was going to be $3 billion. And I know for a fact that $3 billion is not, no matter how you measure diverse owned, including women owned, it still doesn't come anywhere close to $3 billion that's being spent. And the numbers are out there. It's far less than that. I'd be surprised if it's even at $1 billion. So, but what I will say is,
You know, SMI measures that number because they measure whole coast. And so you've got the bigger spenders being measured. So I'm just backing up what you're saying.
The piece I would say is I plus one to everything Sheila is saying, but I'm grateful that even with all that, there are still champions that you can find across certain brands and across certain agencies, and the initiatives haven't all gone away. You know, the bigger holdcos, they all created an initiative. I think they're all still, while it's changed, they still exist. There's still people there who are on the opposite side of this, trying to tell the message that this is not about diverse owned, this is about growth. Look at the statistics, look at the census data. Where are you going to be finding growth in the next 10 years? Everyone's focused on Gen Z. Well, guess what? Gen Z is more sort of multicultural than anyone, and they're making up the population. So I think it's going to continue to be a fight. It's funny because someone said to me, Cavell, if you think it's tough now, you should have seen it 10 years ago. I was like, okay, I wasn't in this part of it 10 years ago, so I am learning. We've only been in it 3 years, but we're learning a lot. But I plus one to everything Sheila is saying. But that doesn't mean we're going to stop, right? That we have to continue to find a way. You can set the bar higher. We're going to knock it out the park, and then you can set it higher again. But it's not going away because the population is not changing. And that's where we have hope, because culture is demanding this. And the brands who do it are winning more than the brands who don't. And eventually that supply and demand and that competition is going to eventually move more brands over into this space. When they start losing market share, their products are declining, sales are declining, that's eventually going to be the tipping point.
That's why I think measurement is really, really important.
100%.
And so if you're able to demonstrate effectiveness, regardless of the media you're buying, but in this particular conversation, diverse-owned media, that it's either as effective or more effective, back to the conversation earlier, I think that's how you retain those media investments. And to your point about growth, I mean, at some point in time, it's the only way brands are going to continue to grow. And so we have to have the tools to be able to demonstrate that return on that media investment.
I think growth too implies the long-term strategy, long-term vision, long-term investment. And I think what we saw, coming back to the 2020 rise, is a lot of commitments being made, but made in reaction to what was happening in the world and the pressures that they felt from their employees and from society and from everyone else to make some kind of commitment or statement to progress. And if you look at it from a reactive perspective, because guess what, 2020, the single moment was not a single moment anymore because everyone else has become under attack over time. And so, lots of groups and identities are now at risk, and we're seeing a lot of that pullback. And so if you spend your time thinking about the reaction to what is happening in the world and the headline, this is not authentic, it's not a genuine commitment, and it's not an investment in the future. And so it has to be tied to not short-term thinking and not what's the next headline and how do I demonstrate to whatever shareholder, employee X that's complaining about something that this is the right thing to do, but you intrinsically make a change in your company and operation, make a long-term commitment, recognize that growth is attached to that long-term commitment, and then stick to it no matter what pressure you're getting from, what customer who's harping at you. And that's where I've seen, we hear from publishers a lot, those commitments are not being fulfilled.
Yeah. And I think it becomes real when you see the tapestry of the organization start looking like the diversity of America. I think there's still, from a hiring perspective with the agency world, a unconscious bias that's there, that you're not seeing the level of diversity as the U.S. population in those agencies. And until you see that actually marry up, I think everything will be an initiative or a drive, which we all know that lives only quarter to quarter, year for year, and then it fades away.
+1, because there are a lot of people in the agencies who do not know what they're doing. We have some amazing leaders, some in this room. Shout out to Deidre back there. And clients, that's true. Amazing agency and clients who are, in the trenches with us, making sure this work happens and moving things forward. But it's exactly what you said. It can't just be one. It can't just be two. Like, we have to get critical mass so that these rooms look like what America looks like, look like what society looks like.
It does take perseverance, I think. I think we can't give up, and I think hard things are hard. And there are setbacks, right? But you have to persevere and continue to try new ways to attract new audiences and new employees to your company, new audiences to your brands. And I think over time, that is going to be what ultimately creates the win for everybody.
One of the reasons we wanted to have this conversation is I do agree with what you were saying, Lori, about, it's like you start to see people take their foot off the gas or take their eye off the ball or whatever metaphor you want to use here. I mean, when the federal government starts getting rid of chief diversity officers, we're all in trouble, right? But it's up to us to keep the movement going. I have two final questions for you guys, and I really want to open it up for questions because you rarely get this kind of a panel together. We should do it much more. Obviously, that's the theme here. But here are my two questions. I'll give you both up front so you can think about it a little bit. Number one, what do we need to do to change the statistic by next year, 2 years from now, whatever it's going to be? What's 1.16? Pick any number. It's got to be better than that. What are you going to suggest? And the other is, will you leave the audience with a little gift in terms of how to get started or how to keep the momentum going? So I know you're saying yes, but what is the answer?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of what we talked about earlier. You have to start somewhere. So as an agency, we set the bar at 10%. Like I said, we're not at 10%, but we're going to continue to strive for that goal until we actually reach it. So I'm hopeful that next year our 5% will grow to 7%, or maybe we will even surpass that 10% goal. But I think there is an element of too much planning and procrastination. You need to find what your goal is, maybe set a lower target, and just go for it.
I think my answer to both questions are exactly the same. If you are a brand, I would encourage you to look at your data and say if 10, 15, 20, 40% of my customer base is coming from these communities, then I should be investing at the same level in those communities in order to continue to grow. So, that's the work, and that's the number. I think it varies for every partner. And so if you are Walmart, and just to call one, and I don't remember the number, but it's a significant amount of Walmart's business comes from sort of multicultural, diverse background folks. They should be investing at the right level in those communities to continue to drive that type of growth. And the step, if you're a brand, is to look at that data. Because then you will realize, okay, here's my growth opportunity. Here's my untapped audience. Wow, am I only reaching 15% of African Americans? Well, why is the 15% that I'm reaching buying? How do I get the other 85%? What does that represent for me in terms of my growth that I need to deliver to my CFO? That's a great opportunity for me. So, as I said, the answer to both questions are the same for me. You have to start with understanding your business in the same way that you analyze your business now, but looking at the different lenses that is represented here.
I'm also going to combine into one answer, which is I think that if it is real and if it's authentic and if it matters for your growth and your long-term investment, which I hope it does because that's short-sighted not to, then if you're an employee that is not seeing the commitment level or doesn't understand it, ask the question. Ask the question at every single level to understand what are we doing to make sure that this happens and that this can be realized to the full potential and the commitments that we have set out to do. That's kind of one if you don't have the ownership or the authority to make those decisions yourself. And then the second thing is if you have the authority to make those decisions yourselves, create a plan that is a fully baked program that is inclusive of hiring and recruiting the right talent, retaining the right talent, and developing the right talent in those positions, giving everyone a seat at the table that can make the right commitment levels to media, diverse-owned media, and then making sure that those numbers and commitments stay the same, review those plans, get resources and help. There's resources like Bridge, like I mentioned, that can help you stand something up like this and look at it from an internal perspective and an external perspective, because then it is embedded within your company and not left to siloed experimental teams.
No, I think for a benchmark that people should look for is the U.S. population and the level of diversity that you see there, and I think your commitment should mirror that component. I do think we have work to do to get there with the level of commitments that need to be made, but that's really, from a marketer perspective, I would be looking to talk to each of those communities in an authentic way through those diverse-owned platforms in order to try to reach those audiences. And I think in regards to how do you get started, I think it all starts with a test budget. But a test budget with a commitment towards optimization, which is, to me, is the most important part, is the availability, the capability, and the willingness to let a campaign get optimized, ultimately for performance, in order for us to realize the benefit. The truth is, all these diverse audiences have money. So why don't you want to try to go get it? And that's really the pragmatism that I have in regards to how to manage those campaigns.
Appreciate that. The bass is kicked in.
I know we got the bass that kicked in for my answer here. So first I will say I'll call it yes and. So for those brands who have multicultural budgets, it is not take it from Sheila and give it to Mark. That doesn't do anything. It's not take it from Sheila and give it to Cavell. It has to be yes and that is how we create change. If you don't increase the sizes of these budgets, then you can't develop the multicultural digital ecosystem, because it becomes a zero-sum game, and I call it, it becomes Hunger Games. Like, we're all like, oh, well, how am I going to get the budget this time? And take so-and-so out and take so-and-so out. We have to realize that more money has to flow into the ecosystem for us all to win. And then for those brands that are not investing, who haven't set aside a specific multicultural budget, I do really think it's important to go back to, as Cavell said, looking at your audience and who is driving your business. If you don't understand where your customers are, who your customers are, where that growth is coming from, you're not doing your job. And you should be doubling down on those audiences that are really driving your revenue and your relevance and your growth.
Amazing. And this is the do what they say and say what they do panel. We finished right on time, but we have time for questions. So I really would love to have questions. Can you get them a mic? or take mine. Just let me not kill myself.
Any questions? All right.
Just come on up to the
Thank you.
stage.
And I have a crack voice. I'm glad Sheila said what she said because it's not about the population anymore. There's no question that the multicultural population is the source of growth in the U.S. It's about the influence and the dollars that they bring to the market. So the population conversation was something that we were talking about like literally 10 years ago. And now it's about they have money. They are, if you're not doing this, you're not actually growing your business. So having a conversation with your clients about a growth opportunity index today and tomorrow. And then I think the other thing is, we talk about agencies. I think it's important to say the agencies have to reflect, but the clients have to reflect what the population looks like. Because we can have as many brown and black people on the agency side, and if they're not mirrored, then the client will say, I understand, but there's less connection and less understanding, and it becomes what Cavell was saying, a race to the bottom. It's like, yeah, we get it, we know we have to include them, but there's no cultural context on the other side.
I do want to add on to that.
Thank
We
you.
did a white paper about 2 years ago to see what the economic impact is for investment in diverse-owned media. I think what was insightful is there were 2 data points that we drew out of it. One, diverse audiences noticed when media was run in their authentic publications. That was one. But also, it was noticed when they didn't run in those media publications, and they took a more punitive action of not voting with their dollars to working with companies that they did not see invested in diverse-owned media. So I think that, yes, there's a growth opportunity, but I also think brands and agencies should be aware there's also a punitive factor to it as well. Because we all know who are the brands that invest. And I bet you if we all wrote down the top 10, we all would probably have the same statement of who actually it is.
More questions? Anybody?
Yes. Any more questions?
Well, I couldn't be more excited to be up here with all of you. Thank you, Mirror Digital, for sponsoring us, and thank you to all of you for coming and honoring this day. Let's do it again. Please, a big round of applause for our panel.
Thank you.
Thank you.